Hello and welcome to the sixth tape in the series of Women in the Old Testament. Folks, this is the very last tape, so you deserve some kind of an award for sitting through 6 of these 45-minute tape lectures. But anyway, this is the last one. I think the stuff we're covering will be of interest to you, and I'll try to make it as painless as possible. The particular class for which this tape is prepared is covering 2 completely distinct topics, and I'm going to be backgrounding both of them in turn. The first one are just some considerations about what I'll call the Greek Old Testament. That is, that part of the Old Testament written last in the Israelite period and in which most of the copies we have are Greek. Now, the reason that's going to be of concern for us is because in fact, we have some very significant books and portions of books in the Greek Old Testament, also called the Apocrypha, also called the Deuterocanon. There are some very significant books in there that are actually about and named after women. We have Judith, we have Susanna, and we have portions of Tobit that we're going to attend to briefly. Then in what's going to be I guess the most significant for me part of the class, I'm going to be going over various ways in which the divine, God, is linked to women, female characteristics. In other words, in what cases do we have in Israel actual Israelite goddesses? And I told you when we examined Genesis 1 that we were going to be revisiting the topic of the gender of God, and this is the time that we're doing it. Okay, let's first talk a bit about the Greek Old Testament. I'm calling it that in order to avoid 2 other terms which are in fact loaded with certain kinds of built-in biases. Those terms are, this portion of the Bible is most commonly called the Apocrypha. In fact, on the spine of the New Revised Standard Version, it says New Revised Standard Version, Old Testament, New Testament, and Apocrypha. Apocrypha is a term that's coined. It actually means hidden things. It comes from the same root as the word apocalypse, which is a revealing of hidden things. So the Apocrypha, that's a reference to these as hidden books. The other term for it, the term that's most commonly used in the Catholic setting, is the deuterocanon, or sometimes the deuterocanonical books. Deutero meaning second, and canon meaning the approved list of books. That's about the best definition I could give to canon in this context. So this is the second list of approved holy books. Apocrypha implies that there's something kind of fishy about these books. Let me just say some general things about the Greek Old Testament. First of all, as should be obvious from the name I gave it, these books are books that are written in Greek. Now, of the books that we have that are written in Greek, there are 2 different categories. The first one are books for which we suspect, or in some cases strongly know, that they had a Hebrew original. So these were books that were translated from the Hebrew. And the second category of books are books that are actually written in Greek. So, the first thing I want to say about the Deuterocanon is that they were books that we have that were written in Greek. The second thing I want to say, let me give myself a little bit more room here. Second thing I want to say is that these books are relatively late. By that I mean they are written at a time subsequent to the time that most of the Hebrew Old Testament had been written. These books came at the very end of the what we could call the Old Testament period, just maybe a century, century and a half, 2 centuries before what we might call the Christian era, the era of the rise of Christianity. So these books are written after a lot of the other books we've studied. They're written after the Genesis. They're written after Judges. They're written after the prophets. These are very, very late written books. So written in Greek, they're late, and this is the part that most people are interested in when I cover this in my classes. These books are included in Catholic Bibles. They're also included in Orthodox Bibles. That is, Bibles that come out of one of the Orthodox churches, like Greek Orthodox, Russian Orthodox, and so on. They are excluded, that is, they are left out of Jewish Bibles, and they're left out of Protestant Bibles. So, why did this happen? Well, let me give you a little bit of historical background that might be helpful in this regard. I've mentioned as background information in a few of the tapes that Israel has gone through a series of invasions, each of which in turn by a different national group. So the first major invasion of the kingdom of Israel was the invasion of the Assyrians, which resulted in the destruction of the northern kingdom and the subjugation of the south. That was in, these dates are not relatively important, I'm not going to spend the time writing them on the board, but that took place in 722. The second invasion, the invasion of the Babylonians, that took place in 587 and resulted in the destruction of Jerusalem and the temple and the end of the Judean monarchy. The third invasion was a little bit more benign than the first two, and that was the Persian invasion, and that was 538. So we're in roughly a 150, 200-year period here where one empire rises in power, and then it falls, and another one rises in power, and then a third one. So we have Assyria and Babylon, both of which are in the land area of Mesopotamia, modern-day Iraq. And then the first significant influence that comes from outside of the region, and that's the Persian invasion, because Persia, contrary to common American belief, Persia is part of Europe and is not part of the Middle East outside. So the Persians come in and invade in 538, and they are in turn overthrown, their empire taken over by the Greeks under that famous Greek general Alexander the Great. So what we have that has to do with the explanation for this is the knowledge that Israel, along with the entire Mediterranean world, in fact all the way to India, is being Hellenized. Hellas is the word for Greece in the Greek language. So this means Grecianized. So the entire world is being Hellenized. Now, among other things, what that means is that everybody who wants to get anywhere in the Greek Empire has to know the Greek language, and so Alexander very wisely simplified the Greek language so that everybody could learn it relatively easily as a second language. And they also had to be familiar with Greek culture. So the Jewish community divided between those Jews who knew a lot about the Greek language and the Greek culture, and those Jews who did not know anything about the Greek language and the Greek culture, mostly located in the land area of Palestine. So we have two different kinds of Jews: Greek Jews, Palestinian Jews. The Greek Jews, as you might expect, wrote or translated their Bible from Hebrew into Greek. So we develop at that point a Greek Bible which is known as the Septuagint. And you'll sometimes see the Septuagint abbreviated LXX, which is the Roman numeral for 70. Septuagint means 70, and there's a story behind that, which I won't tell you now. Anyway, the Greek Jews translated the Bible into Greek and used it. Now, here's the first important point that you absolutely have to understand to answer our original question, which is, why is it that the Jews and the Protestants have one Bible, the Catholics and the Orthodox have a different Bible? And the first thing you have to understand is that the Septuagint, LXX, that Bible included the deuterocanonical works. The Hebrew Bible, which also existed, did not include them because it was only the works that were written in Hebrew, and I already said that these particular works were written in Greek. So the Septuagint contained these books. It was used by the Hellenistic Jews. And here's the second major transition. It was out of the communities of Hellenistic Jews that Christianity arose. So in addition to the fact that the Hellenistic Jews used the Septuagint, the early Christians also used the Septuagint. That was their Bible. 70 CE, that is 70 years after the common dating system that we have, roughly the beginning of the Christian era, 70 CE, the Romans swept into Jerusalem and destroyed it and the temple a second time. And all of a sudden, the Palestinian Jews, those Jews who did not know Greek language and Greek culture, those Jews were placed in the margins. They were placed in the outskirts. And Hellenistic Jews dominated. And the Palestinian Jews, still living in various places in Palestine, they were kind of circling the wagons and protecting themselves. And they made a rule, an attempt, it seems, to return to a Judaism that was not Hellenized. They declared a Hebrew canon for the Jewish community. So in other words, they rejected the already written Septuagint, which was a Jewish Bible, and they turned back to the Hebrew Bible. Now, why did they do that? I mean, nobody knows for sure, but two of the theories are that they did it because they were consciously turning their backs on what they saw was an encroaching culture which was opposed to theirs, which was beginning to seep into Judaism. The other possibility is they were getting increasingly upset by the Christians and the fact that the Christians are using this Bible. So the Palestinian Jews withdrew from the use of the Septuagint, withdrew from the use of these particular books, the Deuterocanon, the apocryphal books. Okay, jump forward about 1,000 years, actually a little more than 1,000 years. And all during this time, Christianity has been using the books listed in the Septuagint. They translate it from Greek into Latin, they go back to the original Hebrew, and they translate that into Latin, but they always use the list from the Septuagint. The Jews all of this time have been using a strictly Hebrew canon and have been ignoring the Greek canon, ignoring the Deuterocanon. So then the Reformation happens, and Christendom, Western Christendom, splits into Protestants and Catholics. The Protestants, in an attempt to get back to the Bible, remember from Theology 101, one of the slogans of the Reformation was sola scriptura, only Scripture. We only get our sources of information from the Bible. So they said, we have to find the most original, the most pristine Bible. And they turned to the Jews, the rabbis, who had been meticulously and laboriously copying these Hebrew manuscripts for something like 1,300 years, and they said, this is our Old Testament. And that's the reason why the Catholic and the Orthodox Bible have more books than does the Jewish and the Protestant Bible. Now, we in this class are interested in the Deuterocanon because there are a number of books that significantly tell us, inform us about the role of women, either in an earlier past time, because a lot of these books are kind of novellas, fiction stories, narratives that tell about Israel's own distant past. But a lot of them are really concerned about women. Some of them we're going to have time to look at in class, others not. So I just want to